Hello, hello, welcome one and welcome all to another edition of Seconds Out Live. I am Ayman Khan here in the hot seat as Danny Flexen takes a moment to rest and recuperate. I'm sure Danny will be back very, very soon. But assisting me in this week's Seconds Out Live is, of course, you guys in the chat. We much appreciate your contributions, whether it's via a like, a subscribe, or questions and comments in the chat, which we'll be jumping into regularly, so please do get those in. I will be reading as much as them as possible. You can do to get guaranteed your comment read out is drop a super chat as well, although there is no obligation to do so. Just feel free if you would like to. Also assisting me is Josh Hart, somewhat of a regular occurrence on Seconds Out Live now. Josh, do you feel a part of the furniture now? How do you feel about jumping on Seconds Out Live and being one of the guest contributors?
I feel I'm more of a regular now. I feel like
As opposed to an irregular.
Yeah. When you got to think, last year I only made like my monthly appearance. I think I've only missed 1 or 2 Seconds Out Live shows this year. So worked my way up the ranks, overtook Josh Green, and now hopefully I'll be taking your role next time, and I'll be the face of Seconds Out Live soon. That is a joke, by the way.
I don't know if I'm the face up. I think Danny's still the man. My grey hairs are getting in there, but no one can quite usurp the grey hair dad guy. But I don't know. It was face of Seconds Out Live. You're like the prospect coming up on the small hall show, and you get a chance every now and again on the big show, the big live.
Small. Are you calling Seconds Out small hall?
No, you're the one on the small hall that we bring in for the big events, is what I'm saying to you.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I'm just a big ticket seller, aren't I? There's always a bit more of a crowd when Josh Hart's in town.
Ticket seller. Wow. Well, we'll see. We'll see what the. Well, to be fair, you do bring your own people in the chat, and they're very much happy to see you on Seconds Out Live. So fair play. You are maybe a little bit of a ticket seller, but you've got to earn the respect of those in the chat as well too, which you've been doing, and I'm sure you'll keep doing as well. And talk about earning respect. Martin Bakole seems to have, through the string of wins that he's had in his recent victory, of course, over Jared Anderson, has started to get the respect of his peers and boxing fans, and the momentum has very much swung towards this heavyweight who wasn't seen as someone who might get to the top, is now scratching the claws in his way up the ladder, and it sees him get an opportunity against Anthony Joshua. And we're believed to, if Martin Bakole's words have been spoken to him and his conversation he had with Spencer Oliver on TalkSport, that the fight with Anthony Joshua is now signed, agreed, and to be taking place in Africa as well, with it to be believed to be taking place in Congo, which was Zaire, where the Rumble in the Jungle did take place many, many years ago. So a bit of history being rekindled and being touched upon through Saudi Arabia's involvement and Turkey Al-Sheikh making Joshua versus Martin Bakole. We'll have a poll. I'll get to Vinny behind the scenes as to who you would put as the favorite, Martin Bakole or Anthony Joshua in that fight, if that fight does get over the line over in Africa. But Josh, your immediate response and reaction to the possibility that these two heavyweights will be colliding in another continent?
I like the fight. I do like the fight, but I think it's out of the current crop for AJ that is a realistic fight. I think it's the riskiest one of them all, excluding all the world champions at the moment, or the world champion at the moment, Usyk and Dubois. I think Bakole's the biggest risk. I think he's the one which you can't really get a lot of sparring that can replicate his type of style that he's got. He's got he's a very big guy, but he's also got very quick hands and stuff like that. So I think it's the toughest one, but I think if it is a fight that AJ wins, it does spring him right back into that world title conversation. So we'll have to see if it is true. Obviously, we know that Bakole's supposedly meant to be fighting F.A. Jagbar in May in an IBF final eliminator. So don't know what the plan is there, unless Ben Shalom and Bakole have just presumed they've already beat a Jagbar and they want to go straight into that Anthony Joshua fight afterwards. They want to have two fights signed at once, but it's interesting to see. I wouldn't be shocked if this Jagbar fight doesn't go ahead now. We've not seen an awful lot spoke about it. I know Turkey has said it's happening in May on the Ryan Garcia, Devin Haney card. I know it's supposedly on that one. But when there's a big money fight there, and a win over Anthony Joshua is a much bigger win than beating F.A. Jagbar in a final eliminator. And even then, final eliminators don't always guarantee you a world title shot anyway. So I think if you're in Bakole's shoes and that Joshua fight is legitimately on the table or was on the table and now signed, they've definitely made the right call in going for that Anthony Joshua fight, especially taking it to Congo in what will be a massive, massive event.
Does that Ajagba fight represent a real big risk for Bakole, do you feel, Josh?
Yeah, I'd say so. I'd say Ajagba's I'd say he's a very good heavyweight, and while Bakole might be better, it is heavyweight boxing, and the cliche saying is that it only takes one shot, which is true. So if Ajagba is to land that shot, the millions and millions and millions that Bakole would lose there, and the big night headline, and I can't remember what I was watching earlier where I heard someone say this, but Bakole, I think it was Ben Shalom saying this in an interview with the Stomping Ground. He said Bakole's one of those fighters that, because he's not from England or from America and had that back, and he's had to do a lot of his talking in the ring. And that win over Jared Anderson has really catapulted him into that territory where he is being spoken about now, and he is a big name in this division, and he is the bogeyman of the division. So I think you've got to give full credit to Anthony Joshua as well for taking that type of fight, because there's much easier fights out there than Bakole, which could also catapult him straight back into the world title talk. But Anthony Joshua seems like he's only here for real fights now. Bakole seems to be the realist fight. So if Bakole versus Ajagba goes ahead, Bakole's got to be switched on that night, because if he just thinks that he'll beat Ajagba in first gear, he's in for a big shock, in my opinion.
Yeah, so I'll jump into the comments in the chat as to what the reaction is to this fight, if it truly is the case and is signed and sealed after Martin Bakole does fight Ajagba, or that fight gets pulled off. But I feel that Martin Bakole does get through FA Ajagba. Will be a fight where maybe it might get difficult in some spots, but Martin Bakole seems to be a runaway freight train that I think Ajagba doesn't quite have the momentum to stop right now. There is a poll that's going up, or I think it is up now in the chat for you guys to give us your responses to whether you think that Anthony Joshua beats Martin Bakole or Martin Bakole will beat Anthony Joshua. But that is an interesting and an intriguing fight with other options seemingly on the table. And though there is contextually with Anthony Joshua off of the back of the resounding, emphatic defeat to Daniel Dubois, there was the thought that he was injured and there's an injury, and does this, this will have to happen after May. So is this given enough time for AJ to rest and recuperate and heal off of the injury going into a fight later on in the year? And then what does it represent in terms of a challenge for AJ? Because there were other options potentially on the table. Rematch Daniel Dubois, of course, that's now off the table. But Deontay Wilder was a potential option. Two fighters who are, I guess, fallen down the ladder, but one could proclaim that they're back up there off the back of beating the other, Dylan White, as well. Too, I think Frank Warren alluded to in his interview recently with Box Nation that Dylan seems to be able to fight in the UK now after having fights over in Malta and Ireland. So does that rivalry get reignited? Or some of the conversations that you have with AJ's team and AJ, you hear him want to get back into title contention, and the fight with Tyson Fury are the ones that he earmarked as those that he'd be looking for this year. Well, if Tyson Fury is now retired, that pulls Tyson Fury off of the table. Title contention, you've got to beat one of the rising contenders, and Martin Bakole is one of those rising contenders, with the others currently locked in to fight each other. Bakole is one who represents someone who is, of course, of African descent. So the likes of a Zhang Cabell winner wouldn't quite represent that. So Bakole seemed like one of the most straightforward options, but he does represent for me a real tough option because of just the momentum he has built. I remember watching Bakole in one of my first fights that I ever covered. It was in Newcastle. He was on the undercard of Ritson versus Davis, I believe it was. And I remember Ryan Elliott, who was formerly of Boxing Social, now of Boxing News, kind of turning to me and saying, "This guy is a real good fighter. I really like him. He's real good at like European level. Maybe just falters a little bit at world level, but he's a real good fighter, one to watch out for." And he did look like that, but he did falter with his potential, and that defeat to Michael Hunter, but that's a completely different sort of style and a version of Bakole that he felt wasn't the full version of himself, and he's improved much more since that fight. And Asia just represent a fleet feet type of fighter, or a real movement side to side type of fighter, as Michael Hunter does. He's now a lot more. He does box more than he did before, but he's not going to be hard to find. And that's a worry, I think, with Bakole's punching power and just how big he is as well. Can AJ put a dent in him? I still think I'd probably favour Anthony Joshua a little bit against Bakole, but not by much. I think it's a razor close fight. I think it's about as 50-50 as you can get. And if I'm talking about favouring Anthony Joshua, it's 51% over 49% in that fight. But a real tough fight in prospect. Let's go into the chat and see what you guys are saying. We have Life and Sports Armchair Psychology. Sorry, the poll is just blocking the name, and it's just removed it from me, so I can't quite see it now. KT00 saying AJ's worst nightmare if this is true. Ring Walk Boxing Podcast says AJ versus Bakole, let's go. Much love from Cincinnati, Ohio, USA. Much love back to you from Birmingham and Nottingham, respectfully. Custer System, good to see you here. Custer System, I cannot see the fight happening if Bakole fight against Ajagba goes ahead in May. Eddie Hearn saying AJ fighting in May or June unless Ajagba is replaced by Bakole versus Joshua. Possibility indeed. We'll keep an eye and tabs on that one to ask Eddie Hearn. Thunder Road, is this the Seconds Out Live transfer window? Post Josh Green is on loan to the Darts until the end of the season with no obligation to buy. Yeah, that's right. Josh Green is on loan at the Darts. I think he's just finished. I'm not the biggest of Darts fans. I did watch I believe it's the World Cup or something where Luke
the World Championships.
World Championship. There you go. Telling you about as much as I know for darts. But I did watch that whilst I was tucking into some nice chickpeas at a restaurant recently with my friend. But Josh does come in and out. And that's Green, does come in and out of boxing when he's needed. So yeah, I guess he is on loan. The transfer window. Look, I've got my Watford shirt on here. Expecting some transfers in for Watford, hoping we cover some of the gaps in our team. But with the amount of money we seem to have in play, doesn't seem like it's going to happen very soon. Big Chungus says, Joshy, washy, woo woo. There you go. You've sold a ticket here, Josh. I'm sure Big Chungus will come to your next fight. Holton Johnson is asking, is this clickbait? Doesn't appear to be clickbait, but we won't know until the fight is fully announced. DB Cooper One, good to see you, DB Cooper One, who subscribed to Shane McGuigan's channel, but hasn't quite subscribed to Seconds Out just yet. It's too laborious of a task for him to click a couple of times on the mouse. He says, though, Cara What's-Her-Face is more part of the furniture than Josh Jr. is. Yoda says, AJ doesn't have a chin. Martin Mulligan, I was watching George Foreman at the weekend. Bakole fights just like that. The first version of George. Thunder Road, Foden in a onesie was not here last week after Forest lost 5-0 to Bournemouth, but he's back after they beat Brighton 7-0 at home. Thunder Road, he's not actually a Forest fan. He's a Manchester United fan born in Nottingham. Make of that what you will. You want
Can I explain myself? Can I just put a case out to defend myself, please?
You can, of course.
So growing up, in the beautiful city of Nottingham, not like my mum or my dad, they're not into football, so I kind of had free reign. And I was watching an England game once, and I just fell in love with the way Wayne Rooney played football. I just fell in love with the way Rooney played the game. I thought he was an exceptional player on his day. So I was like, oh, what teams Rooney play for? And it was Manchester United, and I've just stuck with them ever since. In my great old age now of 18, nearly 19. I've stuck with them despite not watching a lot of football anymore. I am slacking. But when the Euros come around, I'm the biggest football fan you'll ever meet. So just roll on the international tournaments, I suppose.
So I remember when I was a kid, Michael Owen was electric. He was sprinting in, and he was just a brilliant finisher for Liverpool. And I remember they were doing I think it was the World Cup, they were releasing these coins, and you could get these coins in these packs. And you didn't know which footballer you get. You could get like Beckham, you could get David Seaman, whoever was in the England team at the time, Ashley Cole maybe coming through at the time, Robbie Fowler as well. I remember getting a Michael Owen coin, and I supported Michael Owen since Michael Owen and Liverpool for a long time. until I went to secondary school. And my mate Joe, close mate of mine, was like, "You can't support Liverpool. You're not from Liverpool. You got to support a team where you're born." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And Watford had just got into the Premier League that season. I was like, "All right then, sweet. I'll support Watford." And I supported Watford ever since. Haven't turned back. No glory hunting days for me, that's for sure. We're where Watford are right now, but fully hoping that United legend, well, not quite legend, but United favourite, I guess he was. He moved on to Everton. Tom Cleverley, now manager, after playing for Watford, it does do well. But let us know what you think about Josh's journey to supporting United, and whether you.
I think it's perfectly valid. If I'm being honest, I've been told by people that's a perfectly valid excuse.
I don't. But anyway, moving on. Zambana Love says Bakole is a very natural fighter, very fluid punches and sneaky punches, alluding to maybe that uppercut he landed on Jared Anderson. AJ will get caught in between punches as he usually does, but he's got to defend big shots from AJ. AJ is really good. I think AJ's growth as a boxer and understanding in the ring as to finding shots and different shots, I think, is very underrated. And he's not just there. He's not a glass cannon that the first shot I think is going to get to him. Like he's got a decent defense. He should know as well that to keep his guard high and tight. And speaking to Robert McCracken, his former trainer, who a lot of people feel that he was best under, he just said that the case was with Dubois, it was just heavyweight boxing and he got tagged first. Maybe it is a case that whoever gets tagged first is the one that's going down. Yoda says Bakole has that dog. He's hungry. AJ isn't hungry anymore. Look, I get that AJ's desire is in question. I think that if he's continuing, he's got enough desire to want to claim a world title again. If he does, is another thing. But in his worst moment, most recently, where he got rocked by Daniel Dubois, he had that ambition that he did get Daniel and he went for it. It cost him, but he went for it. I think that shows dog for AJ. I think a lot of people overlook that. Magic 71, spelled a little bit differently, but Magic 71 nonetheless says, this is very possibly Joshua's last fight. I believe many boxers have worked out Joshua cannot handle fast, hard, sustained attacks. Bakole is capable of all that. With power, Bakole wins by KO. Got to remember the occasion as well. Joshua's used to big nights, big occasions. And I know this was a question over Daniel Dubois when he proved that. He did have that experience, though, over in Poland, which maybe was a bit too soon for him, but then he translated that into Wembley and it seemed a lot more at home. Has Bakole ever had that? No, he hasn't. And whether that occasion, whether the grandeur, whether the heritage and the legacy might get to Bakole, you've got to ask those things in that, whereas Joshua has experienced those moments, so you never know. DB Cooper One says, not going to lie, I feel like we're gassing Bakole up too much for beating up a prospect, Jared Anderson, who never took boxing serious. Bakole didn't look amazing. Yoda says Eddie is just sacrificing AJ, putting him on the chopping block. I don't know if Eddie's sacrificing AJ. AJ still is one of the cash cows and still brings in a lot of eyes and value to matchroom boxing. I don't know if he's quite sacrificing him. Don't think there is a ready-made replacement for Anthony Joshua just yet. Bakole should rematch Hunter, says the GOAT. We will leave the comments there for a moment. Josh Hart, in defense of himself a moment ago, now has to give his prediction for Joshua Bakole. Who are you backing to get the victory here, Josh?
You sprung it on me. I've not really had much time to think. Ooh.
I did say that I was going to get to you before I see your prediction.
I'm going to go... If we're going off last performances, I'm going to have to go with Bakole, if I'm being honest. We're just at that stage of AJ's career, and I'm not saying this in a disrespectful way by any means, but we don't really know what AJ has left. Obviously, it's very hard to make assumptions on the punch resistance because Daniel Dubois is probably the biggest puncher in the division right now. So it's very hard to say that AJ's punch resistance is gone because it might not be. You can see that he still got up 3 times prior to actually getting knocked out by Dubois. But like I said earlier on, Bakole's style is so hard to prepare for, and the fact that he's so big but with such quick hands, his shots come from a different angle to everyone else's. So yeah, I think I'm going to go with a Bakole stoppage in this one. I think Bakole's just got too much size on his side for Anthony Joshua to deal with. But by no means am I saying that Bakole definitely wins. Again, like Ayman said, it's a 50-50, as much of a 50-50 as it can be. If anything, I still believe AJ comes into it the slight favourite, but I'm going to side with Bakole on this one.
There you go. Split opinion on the Seconds Out Live panel, but make sure to get your votes in. So we don't have a split opinion. Many votes flying in right now. Let's see a few more in there. And we'll close the poll at the end of the show and come back to it as to who Seconds Out Live are picking for Joshua versus Bakole. I'll jump back to the chat before we move on to our next one, which is the discussion surrounding Derek Chisora and his last dance in the UK against Otto Wallen. But the chat is saying so far that DB Cooper One says the boxing YouTube transfer window ended a while back. The winner, our Lord and Savior Lewis Hart, but everyone wants an interview with him now. Am I right? Good luck to Lewis in his endeavors at the ring. Lewis is young reporter who's getting a big opportunity. I'm sure he'll make the most of it. DB Cooper One also adds Josh is a Man United fan born in Nottingham. Bloody hell, who does he think he is? Mark Goldbridge, the Pratt. Are you getting some fire back at you, Josh?
I'm just not even going to try and defend myself here. It's pretty evident that I can't win in this case, so I'm going to throw the towel in and accept defeat. We'll come again another day, I suppose.
Zamano offers also Bakole will show difference between someone born and raised in Africa and someone who was sent there for being naughty in UK. Okay. The GOAT also says AJ takes risks, unlike Tyson Fury, who would never fight the likes of Dubois and Bakole. I respect AJ's career to the fullest if he takes the Bakole fight. Yeah, look, you'll definitely get the respect of a lot of boxing fans for taking it, and I guess that shows the ambition for taking on the threat of Bakole, who's on the rise right now. Whether it's a good move is another thing. Okay, then moving on to, and we'll jump back into the chat after we discuss our next topic. That is The Last Dance. Derek Chisora is back in the ring. He's searching for that 50 fights and out, and the 49th is against Otto Wallen, heavyweight, who has had opportunities against two of the leading lights in the UK, that being Tyson Fury, where on another night he might have got the victory and caused him some problems, and Anthony Joshua, who dispatched of Otto Wallen in emphatic fashion of his own. He never really got a look in against Anthony Joshua, but Otto comes in with his own skill set, comes in with his own threats. I don't think he's quite a tricky southpaw, but he is someone who has a good level of IQ at the top level, someone who's still relatively fresh in the game, a real good victory that he can trade on with some currency against Gasayev. Of course, Gasayev was coming up to heavyweight, and he's known for being a cruiserweight fighter, but a big puncher in Gasayev, and he was able to defuse him on away soil, and that got him the opportunity against Anthony Joshua. Derek Chisora is someone a difficult proposition, even in his older age, and has had many fights, and is showing the scars of war, has earned another opportunity after his big victory over Joe Joyce, toppling Joe Joyce as well, but a victory that a lot didn't see. Like I mentioned, earned another opportunity at season taking on Otto Wallen in the UK, Manchester, this week. Josh, what's your read on this fight for Chisora and Wallen? Do you feel that Chisora will come through the test of Otto?
It's very hard to make a judgment for Chisora to overcome Otto Wallen. As much as I would like to see him do it, Chisora has been a real cult hero in the British boxing scene and given us some great nights. Otto Wallen's still a young fighter, I guess you could say, who's still on his way up, and especially heading into this transitional period of the heavyweight division where we are going to see those top guys start retiring and disappearing. Otto's really going to be believing that a win against Derek Chisora is going to spring him into that category where he's going to be knocking on the door for world titles. And being back at the launch press conference back in November when Ayman was living it up in Qatar with Misfits, there was a different energy with Otto Wallen to what there was with the Anthony Joshua fight the year before. You can tell he's got confidence going into this one. He's a complete opposite style to what Joe Joyce is for Derek Chisora. I think, if anything, the Joe Joyce fight was probably the best fight for Chisora at the time, being another guy who likes to come forward. He's not someone that Chisora had to go looking for. If Chisora is going to want to get to Otto Wallen, he's going to have to go looking for him, and it's going to be a big test on his legs. And a lot of the talking point after the Joe Joyce fight last year was that Chisora's legs just didn't look the same. He looked like he was gassed out from the third round. But there is something about Chisora. I just do feel, last dance in the UK. Can we get one last bit of magic in the UK from Derek Chisora? And I think we could. I've got some weird feeling that Chisora could potentially outwork Otto Valen, because there is something about that Chisora style still, which is horrible to deal with. It's a nightmare to deal with if you get caught by him. So it's a real tough one, though, and especially when the big talk was about Jarrell Miller prior to that. We were all thinking Chisora versus Miller is a brilliant fight, and you go from Jarrell Miller to Otto Valen, it's like, oh, that's a much trickier task to handle. Do I have to make my prediction yet, or can I swing it back your way and wait for a prediction?
You can swing it back my way, but I'm going to come back to you in a moment, because I'm just putting the pieces together with Chisora and some of his comments surrounding his career. And I wanted to ask you as well, Josh, and the people in the chat, as to, if Derek Chisora was to lose, do you think that's him done and out, or do you think he still fights for that 50th fight? And Chisora has been talking a lot about the potential of fighting in Africa as well. And with this rumored fight that seems to be agreed between Martin Bakole and anti-Joshua Martin Bakole, I should say, right now in Africa, could it be that Derek Chisora has this fight, whatever happens, and then they have this big fight in Africa whenever it's supposed to be, and he features on the undercard against Dillian Whyte, someone who's had that history and rivalry with those sort of pieces of the jigsaw start to fall in place as to Chisora's thinking? I just wonder whether a 49th fight, which sees him lose, might curtail that. Do you think if he loses, he might call it a day?
I think it depends how he loses. If he gets knocked out badly, then I'd say call it a day there. But if it is just a fight where he just simply struggles, and it's one of those frustrating defeats where you come out of the ring and you're not too badly hurt or anything like that, and it is just a matter of simply that Otto Valen was just able to stay away from you, then you could always give it a go. And it also depends on how quick that turnaround is for Derek Chisora. If the talks are that AJ versus Bakole is going to fall in about May, June time, from February to May, June, 4 months, 3-4 months turnaround, is that enough time really? Especially when you're going to, if they're still going to push for that Dillian Whyte fight, do you really want to be coming out of a fight with Otto Valen, which is going to be tough? It's a Derek Chisora fight. It's going to be tough for him. Do you want to be coming out of that and going straight back into another training camp where you're going to be preparing for Dillian Whyte, who is very much going to be coming with vengeance, especially with Dillian still wanting to have that one final crack at a world title? He's going to be coming in hard and ready to get you. So I think he'll have that 50th, and I think he'll want that 50th, but it's who will give him that stage for that 50th. That's my question to people, because I think we've already noticed that the board have started putting a few implications on Derek Chisora's fights, and the fact that he's only doing 10 rounders now. He's not going to those 12-round distances anymore, even as a main event fighter. So depending on what happens this weekend, it'll be a real... That's where we'll have to have the real conversation, whether we see a 50 or not. I think if he just loses a frustrating points decision, then yeah, we'll see a 50. But if he has a bit of a beatdown put on him and knocked out badly, or corners pull him out, I don't know. I really don't know, because he has took a lot in his career, and a lot of talk over the last few years. I remember the first show I went to live, and this is really showing my age, was actually Parker versus Chisora 2, fresh out of lockdown. And I remember after that night, I was on my way back from Manchester with my mum, and I was just scrolling through Instagram and Twitter, and everyone's saying back then in 2021 that Chisora should be calling it a day, and we're now sat in 2025, and he's still going. So yeah, we are really getting to that stage now where if it is a defeat for Chisora this weekend, and a bad defeat, then I think the fans would rather just see him retire than try and push for a 50th.
Is your mom a boxing fan, Josh?
I wouldn't say she's a big boxing fan, but she watches it with me because she knows I take enjoyment in it. Like, she's come to Parker Chisora with me, Wood versus Conlon for my 16th birthday. She got me tickets for that. We went to that together. Then I won 3 tickets to Boatsy versus Stepien in Birmingham last year, and we went to that together. And she sits down and watches whenever I'm watching a fight at home and I'm not there covering it now. She'll sit down and watch them with me as well if I'm watching them in the living room. So while she doesn't have the extensive knowledge of a a young, fresh boxing reporter like me, she definitely knows a bit of a boxing, because I do go and probably pester her about it 90% of the day. So she knows her boxing fairly well.
Well, your extensive knowledge will be tested in your prediction for Chisora versus Wallen in a moment. I'll give you a chance to mull it over in your mind as I jump to the chatters to see what they say about the fight. Let's go into those comments right now. And we have here Luke Fury just jumping on for the previous chat about Joshua versus Dubois. Dubois' biggest punch, he stopped Anthony Joshua. It took 4 or 5 knockdowns. He cheated his way to victory versus Hrgovic. Wouldn't quite say that. Many professional headbutts, blood blinding him. I wouldn't say he cheated his way to victory. It happened. The referee has got a reprimand for headbutts, but he got away with it, and that's some of the dark arts. I wouldn't call those intentional either from Dandadois. Big Chunga is saying, protect Josh at all costs, guys. Rally around him and protect your king. Hakan Ringside Live says, I'll be in Manchester from Thursday for Chisora versus Ottawa in fight week. DB Cooper 1 says, only way Chisora gets his farewell fight in Africa is on the AJ versus Bakole Africa undercard, if it happens. No one is paying Chisora to fight in Africa. He'll have to fund it himself. Magic says, not sure about your occasion comment, Ayman. Joshua has lost at Tottenham. Oh, right, okay, about the occasion and Africa, sure. Joshua has lost at Tottenham and Wembley. I do not dislike Joshua. I just do not see him winning in the top 6 anymore. He loses to Ituma and Wardley too. I'm just saying that no nerves, no kind of moment getting on top of him will be a factor. And Bakole hasn't had a taste of that yet. Bakole hasn't been a main event like that yet. Bakole hasn't been in front of thousands and thousands where, I don't know, I think Joshua would be, I'm not saying Bakole will get booed there, but the favor will be firmly behind anti-Joshua, I feel. Anyway, although I believe Congo is Martin Bakole's home nation. Let me just double check that because I do want to get that right. But I believe that Martin Bakole, is of Congolese heritage. So maybe I am wrong there. Shows what I know. Not sure Ottawa hits hard enough to get any respect from Chisora, and AJ walked right through him. Have to favor Del Boy. DB Cooper 1 says, shouts out Hakan to Ringside Live, says, all UK promoters should give you a free ticket, to be honest. You support UK boxing more than anyone, lol. And that gets a thumbs up from Hakan's Ringside Live as well, too. Shout out to Hakan. This one's a good fight for Chisora, says the GOAT. However, if Ottawa can move and pick him off, like what Caballero did, then it could be a long night for Del Boy. Otto should have had a win against Fury. He'll fight 50, win or lose, says Luke. In any case, he deserves to go out on a W. If he loses to Wallen, I'm good with him fighting a pudding, or you can take another risk up to him. Fury gave Otto his name for the performance he had against him in America, and the cut should have been a stoppage in my eyes. I hate cut stoppages personally, comes back with Luke says. It's BS when it happens to the B side, in my opinion. Providing the fighter is competitive and willing, then nobody should have had the right to tell him he can't continue over a cut. Evening, lads, says Danny Gaffilin. Will there be any talk about history making an undisputed heavyweight champ, Clarissa Shields? There will be a touch on Clarissa Shields if you can find the time to do so for sure. But you can catch up with all Clarissa Shields from the press conference, from the first face-off to the weigh-in and face-off, as well as the post-fight reaction from Clarissa Shields. All that is on SecondsOut Live, so make sure you don't miss it. Goat says, Del Boy's physical ability is not what the question should be about. Clear, physically fit. He's clearly physically fit. Can his brain take any more damage without affecting him in the later years for him to soon come? Let's get to then, Josh, your prediction on this fight. And before you give your prediction, I'm going to give my prediction here. I'm favoring a close points decision win for Otto Wallen here. I think that really and truly either fighter can win on points here, but I don't see either fighter winning by knockout. I think Chisora is looking for that big punch. Otto Wallen will have that well scouted. I don't think Otto will quite put on the physical pressure that Joe Joyce was able to do so, because Joyce can absorb so much more than a lot of fighters can do. At least in his pump, that was the case. But I can't get away from my mind the visual of Derek running around the ring to just find reprieve. And whilst he might not have to deplete the gas tank as much as he did against Joyce versus Wallen, I just think the mental pressure and the scouting that Otto Wallen will have done for those big swinging haymakers will have been very well prepared for this fight. And I see that Otto Wallen just picking his punches here in this fight. And it won't be a great fight. Won't be a good one. I think there'll be a lot of kind of, attritional type of affair, a lot of holding, a lot of clinching, a lot of separating from the referee. But I think it will see Otto Wallen picking the better punches against Derek Chisora's volume and seeing him win a razor close decision. What about you, Josh?
I'm in two minds. My safety thought is that I think Otto Wallen just stays on the back foot and just picks Derek Chisora apart slowly to a calm, unanimous decision win. But at the same time, I kind of feel this is Derek's last fight in the UK, and he's said how emotional this is going to be for him and how much this means to him. I just think, regardless of how tired Derek is, he will just keep pushing. I think he could. There's a good chance he could outwork Otto Wallen. I think I'm gonna go with Derek Chisora to win. I'm gonna go with Derek Chisora to win by. I'm gonna say either probably a late stoppage. I think he could get to him late, not necessarily just constantly beating on him. I think just simply outworking him and maybe exhausting Otto Wallen as well. And I just think it'd be great to see Derek Chisora go out with a win in the UK before hopefully one last big fight in Africa, if that is the plan. But if this is Derek's last fight in the UK, I think he'll give it everything. He'll give it all, and it'll get to Otto Wallen late and force him into a retirement.
Okay, then that's Josh's take. If you've got your predictions as well, feel free to put it into the chat as we move on to our next topic, which is David Benavidez versus David Morrell. Before we get into that, Josh, it isn't a topic of discussion, but it did break recently. The Ring Magazine putting out on their socials that an agreement has been made in principle between Canelo Alvarez and Terence Crawford for a clash in September in what's likely to be hosted by Vegas in America. Just your instant reaction to that now being the move, it seems, for Canelo and Terence Crawford.
When did that get announced?
It's not quite an announcement, but
no, but when did you first see the report? 'Cause I've not seen anything on that yet.
So it was 2 hours ago on the Ring Magazine. You got to be hot on the spot. Josh says, I'll read it out for you now as you muster up your thoughts. Ring Magazine says here, Canelo Alvarez versus Terence Crawford now has an agreement in place for a September mega fight on the Riyadh season card in Las Vegas, the Ring has learned. And then it also reads here, Canelo Alvarez versus Terence Crawford agreement in place, with then a link to their article. So that seems to be the move for now for Crawford versus Canelo. What's your take, Josh?
I like it. I like that a lot. I think it's a super fight, isn't it? It's a fight that you wouldn't have ever put together until the influence of Riyadh season and the Ring Magazine especially. So I like the fight a lot. And I kind of favour Terence Crawford, if I'm being honest. I think there's something about Terence Crawford that I don't know what it is, really, but there's just something about Terence Crawford that makes me think that he can beat Canelo. But obviously, in the same sentence, I'm going to obviously say that Canelo can beat Terence Crawford. I think that is. Can we call it a 50-50? I think it's very much a 50-50 fight in my eyes, but I know there'll be people disagreeing, saying that one of them's the major favourite. I think in a lot of people's eyes, from when we read up about it and hear people talk about it, Canelo's the big favourite in their eyes because it's obviously Crawford going up to his weight. But I like the fight. I think the buzz come the fight week will be exceptional. I think it's a fight that, whether you're a hardcore boxing fan or a casual boxing fan, you're going to be watching it. You're going to be staying up for it. And it'll be an occasion to remember. And I'm going to back Terence Crawford. I think Terence Crawford can get the job done. I don't think he stops him. I think 12-round, a close fight, a very close fight. But I think Terence can just about navigate his way around Canelo for 12 rounds to pick it up on a nice points decision.
So I think that, just to give my immediate thoughts on this fight, and Bomac has kind of said on, I can't remember which outlet he mentioned this on. I'd give him the appropriate credit if I could remember it, but I don't have it to the top of my head. But he said, look, we're not imposing any rehydration clauses. We're going up to the weight to fight the guy at that weight. So we're going to fight him and try and beat him at that weight. So they're going the hardest, but the way that they, I guess, would garner the most respect and earn him that respect and legacy over Canelo Alvarez. I feel that Terence Crawford could beat Canelo Alvarez, but the statement I suppose I want to make, which truly reflects my opinions, is Terence Crawford could have beaten Canelo Alvarez if this was at a lower weight. I think the weights are too much of an issue here for Crawford to climb over. I think they're both masters of their ring craft, technique, punch selection, ring generalship. Everything points to them being elite level fighters. But when it comes to fights like this and edges, although Canelo Alvarez has slowed down considerably, this is a guy who's experienced to know which punches are going to land, and you're not going to see quite as movement and body movement and agile Canelo Alvarez, but you're going to see a Canelo who picks every punch perfectly. Well, not quite every punch, but you know what I mean here. He's very much tuned to exactly who he is. And I think that'll be too much for Crawford. I think the tale of the fight is going to be very similar to a fight between Mikey Garcia and Errol Spence. Not quite where Mikey was shelled up as much and didn't really have much offense.
Okay, well, you're back, Ayman. You're back.
Don't know what happened there. Maybe Vinny's cutting me off in my pump, but I was just saying there, momentum's going to be just like Mikey Garcia versus Errol Spence. Not quite as shelled up as Mikey Garcia with lack of volume because Errol was too dominant. But that domination, that Terence Crawford will have success in output in the fight, but the telling and the tide of the fight will be fully in Alvarez's favor for me. So I see like a clear, distinct points decision win for Canelo Alvarez because of the weight. I don't see where the dent is going to come into this. I'd like to know what Terence Crawford's walking weight is, what he spars at, where he is, but I just feel like Canelo is going to be a good 10 to 15 pounds. And having seen Crawford sort of slow down a little bit in terms of how clear his talent was above another fighter at a higher weight in Madrimov, that's just the telling signs here that the elite level, IQ, talent, everything starts to fall at the higher level, at the higher weights, and you're in against still someone who is operating at just a brilliant level. So Canelo Alvarez is a clear favorite for me in that fight. But we're moving on anyway, so let me hear your thoughts in the chat as well too. As to David versus David, I stayed up. I was driving back from Wembley, got back in at 5 a.m. Had a little bit of work to do. No rest for the wicked. No, was not to be deterred by my determination to get all the content out, even if it was at 6 a.m. But I was accompanied by Benavidez and Morrell, putting on a real exciting fight, which the crowd are a charged up crowd does so much for a fight, and those two very much fed off the crowd. And it seemed like David Morrell was getting his success in the fight and maybe was turning a little bit of or getting the early advantage over Benavidez. But Benavidez was able to come on strong in the fight, survive a knockdown, survive a punch after the bell, though didn't really put a dent in him. Morrell kind of losing his benefit of that knockdown, although it seems on the replays that maybe it was a bit of a tangle of legs, but it was called a knockdown and was able to put a dent in Benavidez earlier in the fight. But didn't put enough of a dent on the scorecards, and Benavidez rolled on through with his own momentum and his barrage of punches to get the victory over David Morrell, who is magnanimous in defeat. Josh, did you watch this? What was your thoughts on that fight, which was a brilliant affair?
I did my absolute best to stay awake, and I just about made it. I can't exactly remember what time it was, but I was drifting in and out of sleep throughout the undercard. But we persevered through the main event, and it was a great fight. It was a really enjoyable, competitive fight. I really enjoyed it. I think the right winner. And the future is very bright for David Benavidez. And again, I think I've seen reports from the Ring magazine that there's interest from Turkey Al Sheikh to put the winner of Better Be a Bivol Timon with David Benavidez, which is an exceptional fight. I think we'll be moving away from the talk of Benavidez Canelo now, but I think that's a fight that will always kind of be on the tip of people's tongues, and people will still be talking about that. But back to the fight, a really great fight. I thoroughly enjoyed it. David Morrell very classy in defeat as well. Seeing the post-fight content, and still has a massive future in this sport as well, especially for that only being his 12th fight as a professional. There's no shame in losing to someone like David Benavidez, so he'll most certainly be back. And for David Benavidez, really closes in on a world title shot at light heavyweight.
Indeed, Josh. Here we go. Back to the chat. Jumping back onto the Wallen and Chisora fight. Chisora and Wallen. Wallen counter punches are clean and will catch the judge's eye. Cabell at box, younger Del Boy would say Wallen is better mover and is facing a more washed Derek Chisora. I think it's a good fight, says Hakan. Thinks Otto wins on unanimous decision. Del Boy stoppage or Wallen on point, says the GOAT. Crawford up 2 weight, says MB. Doesn't do it for me. Luke says Crawford is undoubtedly the better fighter, but he's too small. Canelo may come from behind, but probably knocks him out. Melchalo is bigger than, not better than Crawford, and Canelo treated him like a little boy. Danny Gaffulin says inactivity will hinder Crawford as much as the weight, especially if Canelo fights Skull in May. Good point there, Danny. Rod Brown says if Joshua does this, big respect finally from me at least, winning the respect of Rod Brown. A feather in the cap for anti-Joshua. DB Cooper 1 offers this random, but does anyone have any info on this recent boxing betting scandal? Arrests in the Midlands suggest it was Kane Baker's camp, despite Akif Fiaz originally getting all the stick. There was a little bit of information on that. I'm just searching it up now, but I believe that journalist Chris McKenna had a little bit of info on it. I'm just trying to search it up now. I'm pretty sure the gist was, whilst I scroll through trying to have a look at the update, was that it wasn't actually, so here it is. He put this out on his social media on Twitter, 31st of January. The arrests made by West Midlands Police earlier this week in an investigation led by Gambling Commission were not anything to do with the cancelled Akib Fiaz Kane Baker bout from last year. The matter being investigated is another fight on another card involving British boxers. So I believe that will answer your question there, DB Cooper 1. MB says Benavidez is a bad MF. And Neil Reed says AJ 1 lost from retirement. So those are the points as to the chat on David Benavidez versus David Morrell. Looking forward to seeing Benavidez stroll on to world title contention at light heavyweight. I think that Benavidez would... Bivol, I think, is a horrible style matchup for David Benavidez, even though he has volume and output. I just think Bivol is on a masterclass level of IQ. And Benavidez, although he throws so much, I think Bivol would be too clinical for him. But Turbiev is the one, I think, at light heavyweight, he'd have more of a fight against, because it's a complete all-out war between the two of them. And although he's a heavy puncher, Arthur, I think Benavidez has shown that he's got a good chin, and he's shown that he can match him punch for punch. And Beterbiev has had dents put in him before. So I think a fight at the top level, he has more chance of beating Beterbiev than he does Bivol, in my opinion. But 2 good fights in prospect, and we look forward to Beterbiev versus Bivol. We're only days away now from that fight later on in February, so looking forward to seeing that monstrous card and who comes out the victors in that one. We will touch on Clarissa Shields briefly now as we have a moment as we close out the show and we move on to our final topic. The final topic being one of Adam Azim versus Dalton Smith, which I was there ringside for. But Clarissa Shields, look, always interesting when the GOAT turns out, and the GOAT is has moved up to heavyweight, collecting more belts. And she's sort of running, well, she is not sort of, she's running out of rivals and rivalries. And the story's has been written, and the story's been turned into movies, biopics, whatever you want to call it, the small screen to the big screen. Hollywood's success for Clarissa Shields, and the name's getting out there. The Fire Inside, I believe, launches later on in the UK in February, but it's already out in America. It's a Christmas movie, Christmas story. The GOAT is now becoming. But yeah, she looked brilliant again against Danielle Perkins. And I believe apparently it was reported that she broke her jaw, and it was a brilliant pull counter, I believe it was, from Clarissa Shields in the final round against Danielle, dropping her. Couldn't quite get the finish, but another scintillating performance. And I think just the level between Clarissa Shields and everyone else is apparent, even in the UK over Savannah Marshall. Savannah didn't really get much of a look in against Clarissa, and Savannah laments the tactics in that fight. But that's the real, at least UK interest for me, is seeing Clarissa reignite her rivalry with Savannah. Clarissa has said as much as she wants that fight, but it's going to have to happen over in the US. She's also called out Franchon Cruz-Dezurn. She's also said that she might go back to the PFL and fight Chris Cyborg or Savannah Marshall in the PFL. She's also said, look, if Layla Ali wants it, I don't think it's going to happen. Layla Ali is getting on to 50. So Layla Ali, I wouldn't want to see that fight, but there's a rivalry between the two of them. Point is, though, these are retreads, really. These are kind of clutching at different areas to find fights for Clarissa, and she's just so far and above everyone else that I think she can just keep collecting, really. She said that her real goals and ambitions are to get onto Sports Illustrated and have Under Armour sponsorships and Nike sponsorships, and these are things that she has to do by continuing boxing, but her goals are getting those. And it just tells you it's not really about fights. Those are the ones that are in her mind, and she'll use fights to get to those points, but those are what's really driving her right now. And I wish her all the success. Guo is an absolutely brilliant fighter. Don't really want to see her in against men, Jake Paul or another, but she is absolutely heading above anyone else in her craft, with Katie Taylor being side by side with her, but Katie, give her own respect, but Clarissa Shields is very much number one in my eyes. But moving on to our final topic, and that being Adam Azim versus Sergey Lipinets at the Wembley Arena. Josh, before I get into my thoughts on it, were you up watching this as well too? What did you think of the card and Adam Azim's brilliant win over Lipinets?
I wasn't able to catch a lot of the undercard as I was out, but I was back in time for the main event. I caught a bit of the Callum Simpson fight whilst I was out and thought that was a really enjoyable fight to watch at the time. But yeah, look, talking about the main event, Adam Azim with a clinical performance, looked fantastic. If you take out those low blows, it was a career best display from him. Like what a lot of the people have said, I think the fight should have been stopped a lot earlier. And it really does show how good he is, and especially for 22. There's a massive, massive future for him. I really like Shane McGuigan in the corner as well, telling him with those low blows, just touch the body. Don't try to be whipping the shots there. Just touch the body and go to the head. And the second he got given that instruction, from what I can remember, the fight was over 30 seconds later as soon as he got back into that 9th round. So a brilliant display. And a lot of options out there for him next. I think we need to get away from this narrative that it has to be Adam Azim, Dalton Smith next. There's other fights out there. They're both on their own paths. Adam Azim now holds the IBO world title. Dalton Smith is now mandatory for the WBC title. Let them go on and do some other great things, especially in this position that they're in. The only reason why this fight was first spoke about last year was because it was ordered by the board and the EBU for them to defend and unify their British and European titles against each other. People, the promoters, or Ben Shalom in particular, said this fight can be so much bigger down the line, and we are getting to that territory where it's looking bigger. They're now both they have seats at that world table. So I think let them go and chase other titles next, obviously in particular Dalton Smith trying to lock in that WBC world title shot. And as for Adam Azim, I'm not really too sure who I'd like to see him in there with next. Obviously the Dalton Smith name is there, but there's other names out there. So let them go and get their world titles and get those other fights, and we can see them in an absolutely humongous fight. I'd say in another, probably this time next year, if I'm being completely honest. This time next year, this fight could be even bigger than what it is now and what people want it to be.
So post-fight, Shane McGuigan mentioned a number of interesting names as to who potentially could be on the list. I was interested in hearing, of course, Dalton Smith, but I agree with you with the narrative that I think that needs to. Those two are on separate paths, and they need to keep each other in contention and talking about each other to build a rivalry. But the rivalry just isn't there at the moment. It really just isn't. As much as it's been pushed that it is, I think these two will eventually meet, but it's one that warrants them getting at least one of them having a world title. But Shane McGuigan mentioned Jack Catterall. I think Jack Catterall is a little bit further down the line and looking for his own world titles after Barboza. Josh Taylor was the interesting name, of course, formerly of the McGuigan parish as well. But he said that he would understand if Josh wanted more money and money that they couldn't get to attain him because he's sort of fighting a prospect and Josh not a prospect but contender, and Josh wants maybe another crack at a world title opportunity. A name I'd like to float out is I believe Regis Prograis is continuing and probably has enough in the tank to make it somewhat competitive against someone like Adam Azim, former world title holder as well. Maybe Regis Prograis is someone that they could get in the ring next. Otherwise, like, you're looking at really names higher up the level, the chain, and you start moving into real world title contention for Adam Azim. But he seems to right now be earning those opportunities and earning that distinction of being a world title contender, or at least very close to that right now. So we'll see what's next on the horizon for Adam Azim, who looked, for all intents and purposes, to warrant a lot of the hype and talk about him when he was first starting out. Elsewhere on the undercard, I'll just brisk through some of this. Hassan Azim returned to the ring, not with McGuigan's anymore. Nothing sensational to report about that. There's just amicable split between the two of them, and Hassan looks to fulfill his own potential, going a slower pace than his brother Adam, but still has a lot of potential himself. Returned to the ring with a points decision win. Garen Croft, the Croft twins. Garen made his debut. Looks good, and he would look good in his debut win. He was there to kind of showcase his talents, but one to keep an eye on alongside his brother. Emily Colombo, a bit of a interesting one in seeing Emily Colombo in a fight that didn't really mean much, I guess, but maybe they're looking to build Colombo into another fight. I believe he fought. Did he fight Majimov?
I don't think so.
He did. He did fight Majimov back in 2021. Yeah. So maybe Boxer looking at him and trying to see if they can get him as a B side.
Isn't he? I want to say he's trained by Billy Nelson as well, by the looks of things.
He might be, yeah.
When I was watching that, so I caught a few of the prelims, and I saw Billy Nelson in his corner, so that could be one of the reasons why he was on the undercard as well.
Alfie Clegg, one that Dean White is pushing as a top talent. Didn't manage to catch Alfie Clegg, but he did win on points. Lucas Rohrig, this is George Groves' protege. Lucas, I wanted to catch a glimpse of him. Looks good against Savage. I think Lucas was probably a little bit gung-ho and got hit a couple of times. No dents in him by any means, no impact in the punches, but you just want to see that little bit of a catch and then go on the offense. But Lucas was obviously very keen to impress. I'm looking forward to seeing Lucas and George. It's very weird watching George Groves, because for me, George Groves turned me into that hardcore boxing fan in his rivalries with, of course, Jid DeGale and notably Carl Froch. But just the way he presented himself was very much engaging, what I liked in a fighter. So to see him in the ring, in the corner, is very different and a little bit strange. But looking forward to seeing George and his prospect, Lucas Rohrig, continue on. Scott Forrest. Scott in the light heavyweight division. Always kept an eye on Scott. Very nice fellow. Good to talk to. Was looking for an opportunity, and Boxer seemed to want to give him those opportunities. Was out recently against Devon Miller. But I just wondered where Scott figured in the ladder of light heavyweights, particularly on the domestic scene. He was fighting an Morrell Ignat who was backed by Martin Bowers, and I think he has a heavy kickboxing background. And Scott went on the front foot from the off. Ignat looked composed. Scott looked fast and heavy in his punches, but he just got caught on the top of the head. And as soon as I saw that, I said, look, this fight is done. He's gone. His equilibrium's gone. He seemed to be able to cover up, but I think he was shipping too much and not responding for the referee's eye, and that gave Lee Every a decision, and he made the decision to stop the fight. Scott protested. Scott was also, I think he said he's in disbelief that it happened. Maybe he searches for the rematch, but one that Oral Ignat sort of not quite announces himself, but he earned another opportunity very soon. I think he's penciled in for another fight as well, so we'll see more of Oral Ignat in the future. Jamie Shakiva against Michael Webster. I don't think this really kind of became much of a entertaining affair. It was a real kind of two big type of lumps type of fight, but Shakiva got the victory, stopping Michael Webster. He was stopped in his corner. His corner pulled him out. Webster, if I remember correctly, caused Shakiva a couple of problems in the fight, but I didn't think he had the gas tank to really kind of push on through. And eventually he was stopped by TKV. Callum Simpson against Elvis Ahorga. Ahorga really stole the spotlight, didn't he, in some of his pre-fight comments. He was very much someone who was very entertaining. I was looking forward to seeing Ahorga. Had fans. People enjoyed the Buffalo Soldier ring walk as well. And he made a fist of it for 2-3 rounds. Gas tank fell. Callum Simpson wasn't really all that enamored by what Ahorga had to offer. Ahorga looked like someone who is very fit, has probably a little bit of potential to do a bit more in the game, but I don't think he's really been trained properly. Couldn't really punch, to be honest with you, and the way he was punching, his technique was all off. So someone might look at him and say, like, we could fashion him into something of being like a real good, entertaining B-side. And by all means, Shalom has said to him like that he'll give him another opportunity because he sold, or at least he entertained and made this entertaining fight. But Callum Simpson is the real gem here. And on short notice, he was able to bring a large number of fans from Barnsley down to London. He's earned his rest now, but now the announcement is that he's earned a full stadium fight at Oakwell in Barnsley, and it's named the likes of Pacheco and others. Who else was mentioned? Danny Jacobs, don't quite see that one. Shane Mosley, possibly. But it's all Oakwell for him. Big opportunity for him. And he's very much impressing in these chances that he's been given. And Adam Azim, as we mentioned there, bright talent for the future. So looking forward to seeing where Adam Azim goes next. But that's about everything for this week's edition of Seconds Out Live. We did have a poll. I will jump into the chat for one final time as to your comments while we close the poll and get the results. Vinny will tabulate them. It's like a ask the audience from Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, and you get the bloop, bloop, bloop noises. We're getting those tabulated. The chat will come to you to see what you say. MB says, I see Benavidez versus Opata as a future fight if they can be around the same weight. Brilliant fighting prospect. Lou Brown got Parker winning by decision if he can get past the first 6 rounds. Big call. Martin Bakole said the same sort of thing, that he felt that Parker would stun Dubois. Rod Brown says, by all rights, Parker should get knocked out. Unconvincing Dubois always give doubts. Gilfillan says here, I'd like to see Ayman take on the Groat. I would not like to see that. Thunder Road says, Clarissa Shields should join the WWE, maybe like Ronda Rousey did. She certainly has that reputation. Not quite as big a spotlight as Ronda Rousey did, but would love to see Clarissa Shields in WWE. Did watch the Royal Rumble. Was certainly impressed by the Royal Rumble this year. Very good. DB Cooper 1 says, I still think Azim has a lot to learn, but a great win. Lipinets based off Insta had a serious camp and came to win. Better win than Dalton's over Jose Cepeda, in my opinion. But Azim needs time. It's still raw. I agree with that summation. I was really impressed, though, that Azim's just really grounded himself out, and the like eagerness and the flashiness to want to go straight gung-ho for the knockout has really been fashioned out of him. And this is a fighter who's firmly on his feet and is thinking, and he goes through the fundamentals first, finds the gaps, and then pulls out the flashiness of his skill set. And that was what really took my eye from this Azim win. MB says Azim could make a defense of IBO against Michael Rivera and get an IPF ranking from it. Gilfillan also says progress at this stage will be easy work for Azim. Slow feet won't get past the left hand. Ra Hokum, good to see you, Ra. In incognito mode, Rahim, Radio Rahim Hokum, Radio Ra Hokum. Yeah, but in incognito mode was Ra Hokum. I nearly did it again. With his, what would you call it, balaclava up ringside. Very interesting attire. Got to talk about Colombo Danger Man at 154. He KO'd Sam Antwi is Bakole's brother-in-law. We did touch on Emily Colombo. Big Chungus, is it me or does Ayman look like he smells really good? Big Chungus, thanks for mentioning that. I do. I'm a fragrance head. I've recently purchased a couple of fragrances and I'm trying out this one. I don't like it at all, but I'll give you a little blamage. Not really for my liking, but fragrances are something I do like. Low Brown says Parker has one of the biggest chins in the division. It's not going to be like AJ's. Lou Brown also says he's only been knocked out once and he was sick that fight against Joyce. Pioneer Capital also says, is this not the same AJ that they said is finished and scared to fight? And here he is taking on Bakole, who's an even more dangerous opponent than Dubois. Looking forward to the Rumble in the Jungle too. Ra Hokum says, get Elvis fights at middleweight here where he could be dangerous. Thunder Road says, Ayman and Josh should spar in the gym. Ayman trains in. Josh is very welcome to come down to the gym and have a spar by all means. Josh, do you want it?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm game. I'll be there.
I'm going to the gym as well after this to get a training session in, so got to get that weight down. Savannah Love says, need to condense amount of women's belts. If there's only 18 fighters in the division, having 4 world titles, is it really warranted? Fair point. TBQ1 says, where's His Royal Highness Danny Flexen? In for another hip replacement, is he? Danny goes on, at least from his Instagram, as I can see, long walks with his partner, his child, and I believe they've got a pet dog. So I'm hoping that he's got the suitable attire, suitable shoes on for long hikes and walks, and his hip hasn't come out of place and needs a bit of recovery. But I think it's just a little bit of respite this weekend, and he'll be back very soon. Looking forward to his return. Got to keep the fans waiting, of course, for something. Big Chunga says, I'd recommend Noted Aromas. You've given away 100% who you are, Big Chungus, but I would not recommend Noted Aromas at all. If you're going to go for any fragrances, get the real thing, not duplications. Thunder Road says, hopefully Flexen is on his way back from interviewing Dave Dubois. Hopefully we do get to see Dave Dubois again on Seconds Out. Real good, engaging interviewee he is. Akelo Nita says, is the AJ versus Bakole fight finalized? It is, according to Martin Bakole's interviews he did with myself and with Talk Sport. That is everything. The poll is in, and the results are as follows. We asked you, in light of the talk of Anthony Joshua versus Martin Bakole in Africa, who are you backing to win, Anthony Joshua or Martin Bakole? Those were the two choices, and the winner is Martin Bakole by 55%. Anthony Joshua coming in at 44% of the votes. What's your reaction to that, Josh?
Well, it agrees with my opinion, doesn't it? So I agree with it. Not overly shocked by it. Again, it's close though. It's close, like we said, Ayman. It is down that 50-50 route. Obviously, 55-44 here. Don't know where that 1%'s gone, but yeah, I think I agree with that.
Yeah, I think, like I said, it's 51%, 49% type of fight for me, and that's pretty close to that. So yeah, I think the Seconds Out Live listeners are very much on point with our thinking. Good stuff, says Kelly. Lou Brown says, Bakole getting killed for sure. I'm hating. No need to hate. It's all love here. It's all Zumbano love here on Seconds Out Live. But I hope you guys have loved this week's edition of Seconds Out Live as I give Josh the mic to, as is customary, the final thoughts. I'd like to thank everyone for their listenership and viewership. Thank everyone for clicking the like button and subscribing to Seconds Out Live. We will be in the field, of course, for Derek Chisora versus Otto Wallen and any of the latest breaking developments in boxing. But again, as is customary, the final word goes to you, Josh Hart. What would you like to say to close out this week's edition of Seconds Out Live?
Thank you all for joining. First of all, as always, it's always good to be on here as I slowly make my way up the rankings of the Seconds Out Live show. I think I'm in third now, I guess you could say. It's going to take some topping to overcome Danny and Ayman at the top. I'll be bringing you content this week from Sheffield as I trek up there for GBM's first show of the year with Shakan Pitters going for that long-awaited shot at the EBU light heavyweight title. Shaquille Thompson on the undercard. I still don't think there's yet to be a named opponent for him. I know we've got, I believe, Raheem out in Manchester for the Derek Chisora fight. Big week of content coming up. Everything will be available on Seconds Out as soon as we get it up. And yeah, hopefully I'll be back again next week. If not, I'll see you all again probably at the end of the month.